Today, friends, we're going to talk about the human liver. What is this organ? Why does it get sick? What does it actually do in our body? Why does it become ill? What are we doing wrong with our liver? Why do we treat it incorrectly, misuse it? And what should we do to keep our liver healthy? Today, that's what we'll be discussing. So the liver in humans is a part of the digestive system, one of the largest glands in the digestive system, and it is located in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen. And if we look at it broadly, the liver has two main functions in our body. First, the liver produces bile. Bile is a specific enzyme for digesting fatty foods. More precisely, bile itself does not digest fat. To digest fatty foods, there is the enzyme lipase from the pancreas, but bile acts as a coating agent and emulsifier, which makes fat accessible for digestion by other enzymes. For example, a very good analogy for bile is the dishwashing detergent you use to wash your dishes. For example, to wash grease off dishes, you add this detergent, which is alkaline. That is exactly what bile produced by the liver is like. It is toxic, it is alkaline, and it is chemically active. But that's exactly what's needed to digest fatty foods, the fatty meals that a person eats. And the liver's job is to produce this very bile. Further on, bile is produced by hepatocytes, the cells of the liver. It flows through the system of bile ducts into the duodenum. But since people don't eat constantly, but rather in intervals, dividing meals into breakfast, lunch, and dinner, bile doesn't flow into the intestine continuously. And in the human body, there is a sac, a storage sac where bile accumulates. It's called the gallbladder, and bile flows. It flows from the liver into the gallbladder. And at the moment when some fatty food enters the digestive system, and I repeat, fatty food, bile cannot be flushed out with warm water, as some people think. It is specifically fatty food when it enters that causes the gallbladder to contract, and it pushes this portion of bile into the duodenum so that the bile can digest accordingly the fatty food. And in order for the liver to constantly produce bile, it must be regularly released and used up. In order to keep the liver healthy, it is necessary to eat on time to ensure the proper use of this bile. That's the first function. The second function of the liver is blood purification. In our intricate circulatory system, there is one particular part that is, let's say, the most contaminated or impure in the human body. This is the blood that comes directly from our digestive organs. That is, all the food I eat is digested in the digestive system, broken down into its component parts, and then through the system of intestinal villi, these nutrients, amino acids, fatty acids, glucose, and other substances, everything I eat is absorbed into the blood in the intestine. But this blood, my friends, contains a large amount of substances that are not typical for blood, that are unusual, can be toxic, and can cause significant harm to the human body. That's why all the blood from the digestive system doesn't go into the general bloodstream. It is collected into a single vein, which gathers blood from the large intestine, part of the small intestine, the stomach, and for some reason from the spleen as well. But all this blood cannot enter the general circulatory system. It is collected at the portal of the liver. And that's why the largest vein is called the portal vein, or in Latin, the vena portae. And then the portal vein, which carries all the venous blood from the digestive organs, passes through the liver, branching out into capillaries. And as it passes through this sieve of the liver, the blood is cleansed by our liver. In this case, the hepatocytes there take out everything toxic and poisonous from the blood, essentially purifying all the blood that comes from the digestive system before it enters the general circulation, allowing through only what is already safe and won't harm the heart, brain, or other organs. And because of this, remember that all the blood from the digestive system passes through the liver's sieve-like filter for purification. And so the second problem associated with this liver function manifests itself in the fact that sometimes we consume something poisonous, toxic, or unnecessary, like alcohol or various chemicals such as medications. They are absorbed into the blood in the digestive system, and then all these toxins, once they enter the bloodstream, can cause such a severe poisoning of the human body that it could even result in death. That's why everything that passes through the digestive system ends up in our liver. And all these poisons, toxins, pills, chemicals, alcohol, they are all neutralized, detoxified, and rendered harmless by the liver cells, the hepatocytes. It is precisely because of this that liver damage often occurs. Damage caused by the poisons that a person consumes, yes. And because of this, lesions often form in the liver. Later on, they form as bubbles, cysts in the liver. Over time, the structure of the liver may undergo degeneration. It becomes overgrown with connective tissue, leading to liver fibrosis and the development of sclerosis. Eventually, there can even be such degeneration that it disrupts the integrity of the liver's structural elements, resulting in cirrhosis of the liver. In other words, this is a degeneration in which the liver ceases to function as a filter. Blood can no longer pass through a cirrhotic liver. This creates a second problem for it. So our liver has two functions. The first is the production of bile. The second is blood purification. Because of the first reason, that a person does not have a proper diet and bile production does not coincide with when a person eats, bile stasis often develops. For example, if a person has a long break between dinner and breakfast, 12 hours, a big gap between dinner and breakfast. This is called intermittent fasting. But this means that in the morning you have a full gallbladder of bile that the liver produced overnight. This means that in the morning you need to empty the liver and gallbladder by eating a lot of fatty foods for breakfast. But people often don't eat much or anything fatty in the morning, and sometimes they skip breakfast altogether. Because of this, the morning bile destroys the very structure of the liver, and over time the liver tissue is replaced by fat, leading to fatty hepatosis or liver steatosis due to bile stagnation, which damages the structure of the liver lobules, the ones responsible for filtration. This is the problem when the liver undergoes fatty degeneration. The reason is that a person doesn't have a proper, substantial and fatty breakfast. And the second liver problem is related to detoxification. If a person eats something toxic, consumes chemicals, takes medications, or drinks alcohol, then liver degeneration occurs. Liver poisoning leads to the formation of cysts, and changes in the liver structure occur, sclerosis, fibrosis, and eventually cirrhosis of the liver, as well as the development of liver cysts. How can we achieve liver health? Achieving health, guys, comes down to three things. First, for the liver, it's important that you damage it as little as possible. That's why, as a doctor, I am against the oral use of medications. First and foremost, medications. Because sometimes a person takes a handful of pills at once. It's all chemicals. And the inactivation of these chemicals falls on the liver. The liver has to detoxify all of this. The liver has to deal with all of it. And these drugs, especially when people are prescribed medications, just think about it. They're told, you will take these pills every day, constantly, for the rest of your life. That's the worst thing. You shouldn't do that. You can't act that way. It poisons a person's liver. That's why you should avoid chemicals. As a doctor, I have other options, not enteral, but parenteral administration of medications, intravenous, intramuscular, whatever is needed. But when tablets are taken orally by mouth, they have low bioavailability. Only 20 to 5% of the active substance from a swallowed tablet actually enters the systemic circulation. 80 to 95% of that tablet will simply be inactivated by the liver. The liver perceives it as a toxin, simply as a poison. A poison needs to be neutralized. And a person takes a pill without realizing that almost nothing from that pill actually gets inside, let's say, into the bloodstream. That's why it's essential to avoid chemicals, avoid toxins, avoid alcohol. Giving up alcohol is crucial as it severely damages the liver. Yes, the liver gets used to it. It has a very strong ability to regenerate. It recovers. But why kill it unnecessarily? After all the alcohol a person consumes passes through and destroys the liver. The liver is affected first and foremost. The second thing you need for liver health is to change your eating habits. And I never change what people eat or how much they eat. I change when they eat. So you take what you used to eat before and you keep eating it just in the morning. You should have a big breakfast, large, hearty, and fatty. Be sure to start it with a first course, like soup. This is the healthiest thing you can do for your digestive system. And it's essential that during breakfast you use up all the morning bile that has accumulated over the period when you didn't eat all night. That's why breakfast should be big, hearty, and use up all the bile that has accumulated overnight. Lunch should be smaller, much smaller. Basically 60, 30, 10. This is how your meals should be distributed throughout the day. 60% for breakfast, 30 for lunch, and 10 for dinner. This is the most proper way to distribute your food intake during the day. That's the second and third points. The third thing you need is to ensure good bile flow. And for that, I have products made from Turmanium ceramic, which I, as a doctor, use in my practice. When heated, Turmanium ceramic produces warmth with the same parameters as the heat of my own body. That's why a Turmanium device can't be replaced with a rubber hot water bottle or anything else. Turmanium devices include Turmanium mats and Turmanium belts. You apply the heated Turmanium ceramic to the right hypochondrium, heated to a temperature of 50 to 55 degrees. Warm up the liver for 20 to 30 minutes. As a result of this warming, the bile ducts expand, all the bile flows into the intestine, and if there is a stone in the gallbladder, God forbid of course, but if there is, the stone will never start moving because of this heating. On the contrary, the stone will remain in place, but it will be constantly washed and rinsed by the moving bile. And this is the most important thing, the main point in gallstone disease. The stone will never move because of warming. A stone can move when you eat certain foods, but that's when the gallbladder goes into spasm. But heating does not cause the gallbladder to spasm. On the contrary, warming the abdomen actually helps to get rid of stones in the gallbladder. And it should definitely be for 20 or 30 minutes. But this means that you shouldn't apply heat on an empty stomach because bile will be released. You should always apply heat after eating. These are the things, these three things that are necessary for a healthy liver so that our liver has good conditions to function. This means avoiding toxins. It means proper nutrition and warming the liver every time after eating. And 4 months after you start using this method, get an ultrasound and see how much the structure of your liver has improved. This will allow you to make sure that this is exactly what is needed for your liver to stay healthy.